us now and go a little bit deeper on this. An expert he is when it comes to deciphering writing. James Fitzgerald is a former FBI linguist who poured through Ted Kaczynski's manifestos. Boy, we haven't said that name in a while. And he was able to actually help eventually identify him as the Unabomber. He is the author of the memoir series, A Journey to the Center of the Mind. Great to see you tonight. Thank you for being with us, James Fitzgerald. Let's start with what you say should be a commonality in something and in identifying someone, and that is that they use the lingo that only people in the room or the circle would know about. Did you find that in this op-ed?
Well, I certainly did, Harris, and there's no question this person has an advanced level of writing skills, and he or she, not sure exactly gender at this point, but they know how to write very succinctly, very cogently, and get their points across. There's 27 paragraphs here. 14 of them are only one sentence, which is kind of unusual for people's writing style. Paragraphs are generally supposed to be more than one sentence. However, some journalists do tend to write in only one sentence. So there are some, and I'm certainly aware that this may have been, there's been a copy editor involved in this to some degree at the New York Times, maybe even several levels of that. So there may have been some editing here, but there's definitely some language familiar to this person, and certainly from someone who may be involved in the White House staff.
So I made a similar observation, although it's different experience that's driving it. You're looking at it forensically, and I'm looking at it from the eyes of a journalist. Almost everything has some copy editing, unless it's breaking news, just to make sure that the verbs are succinct and those sentences are easy to digest and remember, which is why they tend to be very short. Let's talk about the perspective that you found from this writing. You say that there's no singular point that says, oh, it's got to be this person because that's their expertise. You say you could almost get what's in this op-ed from reading about other stuff.
Sure, and what I've handled dozens of these cases, even in retirement in the last 10 years from the FBI as a forensic linguist. And there's a website called glassdoor.com. A lot of people go on that and complain about their jobs, their companies, their CEOs. And I've been hired by some CEOs to try to find out who may have written these things. I don't judge whether it's right or wrong, whatever. They ask me to try to find authorship and determine it. I do. And this letter, these 27 paragraphs, could almost be sort of an elongated version of a Glassdoor posting, complaining about a boss, about a company who does things wrong. So that's not all that unusual in terms of my experience. But what I've noticed most importantly in those other types of communications, they're what I call is a linguistic proof of life. Now, anybody familiar with, kidnapping cases, there's generally a picture of the victim holding up a newspaper or something that can be dated. And as you said earlier, Harris, there's really, and that would be something that would prove the kidnapped victim is still alive, so of course pay the ransom, etc. But here in this document, in all 27 paragraphs, there's not one thing that's singular, as far as I know, that hasn't been already mentioned in the media, in someone's book, or various pundits commenting on. So to me, there's a possibility it takes away from that.
Yeah, is what you're saying. It's like a calling card. We all watched enough of those CSI-type shows where they're leaving their calling card, is what you're saying. I want to turn to a couple of things that you pointed out to my team. You said that you looked at some things. Let's put these words up on the screen if we can. That is why many Trump appointees have vowed to do what we can. You say that that's an important point to look at. Why is that, James?
Well, first of all, anonymous authors have two goals in mind. One, to get their point across, and two, to remain anonymous. And it's about a 50-50 percentage, roughly, of how important they take each issue. So here, in a letter that's supposed to be anonymous, we have here an interesting autobiographical clue. That is why many Trump appointees have vowed to do what we can. So this person is including himself or herself in this group of Trump appointees. I would consider that, and this is a linguistic term that I coined, a contraindicator. That means it's against indications. It's against what's truthful. So it's very possible that this person is lumping they're lumping themselves in with a Trump appointee group, but in reality they may not be that. They may be a lower level, someone who just took a regular job, and somehow now they're involved in the White House staff in some decision making, and all of a sudden they're trying to lump themselves in with this to try to make themselves appear more important, but also not identified.
Well, you know what's interesting about what you say, lower level, and that's the idea that if the New York Times sort of suggesting, more than suggesting, that this was a higher level official, puts them on a different playing field in terms of their sourcing for this. But if it is in fact a lower level person, the criticism has been, well, is that then closer to gossip than expertise? It's an interesting question, and you pointed out here is from a different perspective. James Fitzgerald, thank you very much. Great to have you on the program tonight.
You're welcome, Harris.
It was the moment of defiance that turned out to be, well, not so defiant.
This is about the closest I'll